Welcome to Cash Calls. In today's episode, we delve into a provocative and complex topic. Here's how President Donald Trump can get a third term. The 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution imposes a two-term limit on the presidency, making a third term unprecedented in modern times. However, political discourse has entertained various scenarios that could potentially allow a president to extend their tenure. Join us as we explore 10 detailed points outlining the theoretical avenues through which President Trump might seek a third term. 1. Constitutional amendment to repeal the 22nd Amendment. The most straightforward, yet highly challenging, path to a third term involves amending the Constitution to repeal or modify the 22nd Amendment, which currently limits presidents to 2 terms. This process requires a proposal by a 2/3 majority in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, followed by ratification from 3/4, 38 out of 50, of the state legislatures. Given the rigorous nature of this process, such an amendment is rare and demands substantial bipartisan support. Historically, there have been attempts to repeal the 22nd Amendment. For instance, in January 2025, Representative Andy Ogles introduced a joint resolution proposing a constitutional amendment that would allow a president to serve third term, specifically aiming to enable President Trump to run again in 2028. Despite such initiatives, the likelihood of success remains low due to the significant political consensus required across both federal and state levels. 2. Legal challenges to the 22nd Amendment. Another theoretical approach involves mounting legal challenges to the 22nd Amendment's validity or interpretation. This strategy would require presenting arguments before the judiciary, potentially reaching the Supreme Court, to contest the amendment's constraints on presidential terms. Challengers might argue that term limits infringe upon the democratic right of citizens to choose their preferred leader, especially if the electorate demonstrates a clear desire for a president to continue in office. However, the judiciary has historically shown deference to the Constitution's explicit provisions. Overturning a clear constitutional mandate through legal challenges would be unprecedented and faces significant hurdles. The courts are likely to uphold the amendment unless compelling arguments demonstrate a fundamental conflict with other constitutional principles, which, in this context, appears improbable. 3. Vice presidential candidacy and succession. An unconventional and legally ambiguous strategy involves President Trump running as a vice presidential candidate alongside a chosen presidential nominee. In this scenario, if the ticket wins and the president-elect resigns or is unable to serve, the vice president, Trump, in this case, would ascend to the presidency. While the 22nd Amendment restricts individuals from being elected to the presidency more than twice, it does not explicitly prohibit a 2-term president from serving as vice president or succeeding to the presidency through the line of succession. This approach would undoubtedly face immediate legal challenges and intense scrutiny. The ambiguity surrounding this tactic stems from the lack of precedent and the potential conflict with the spirit of the 22nd Amendment. Legal scholars are divided on its viability, and the Supreme Court would likely be called upon to interpret the constitutional implications of such a maneuver. 4. National emergency and continuity of government. Declaring a national emergency that necessitates the suspension or extension of presidential terms is a highly contentious and speculative scenario. In theory, if a crisis of unprecedented magnitude, such as a major war or catastrophic event, occurred, arguments might be made for maintaining continuity of leadership beyond the standard term limits to ensure national stability. However, the United States has a robust constitutional framework designed to ensure the transfer of power even during crisis. The invocation of emergency powers to extend a president's term would likely be met with fierce opposition from both political institutions and the public, as it challenges the foundational democratic principle of regular free elections. 5. State-level initiatives and resolutions. States possess the power to initiate constitutional amendments through a convention, called by 2/3 of state legislatures, a method that has never been successfully employed. In this scenario, if a significant number of state legislatures aligned politically with President Trump were to call for such a convention, they could propose an amendment to alter or repeal the 22nd Amendment. While this method circumvents Congress, it still requires ratification by 3/4 of the states, making it a formidable challenge. The logistical and political complexities involved render this approach highly improbable, especially given the diverse political landscapes across the states. 6. Public movement and political pressure. A groundswell of public support advocating for a third term could, in theory, exert significant pressure on lawmakers to pursue constitutional changes. If a substantial portion of the electorate mobilized to demand the continuation of President Trump's leadership, it might influence legislators to consider proposing amendments to accommodate this demand. However, translating public sentiment into constitutional change is a complex process requiring sustained advocacy, strategic organization, and overcoming substantial political and institutional barriers. While public opinion plays a crucial role in democratic governance, effecting such a fundamental change through popular demand alone remains a daunting endeavor. 7. Leveraging non-consecutive terms. The 22nd Amendment prohibits individuals from being elected to the presidency more than twice. However, it does not prevent a former president who has served 2 terms from running for a non-consecutive third term. President Grover Cleveland exemplified this by serving 2 non-consecutive terms in the late 19th century. In President Trump's case, having served 2 terms, this avenue is not applicable under the current constitutional framework. Any attempt to pursue a third term, whether consecutive or non-consecutive, would necessitate constitutional amendments or other extraordinary measures. 8. Redefining the scope of the 22nd Amendment. Some proponents might argue for a reinterpretation of the 22nd Amendment's language, suggesting that the term elected implies a specific electoral process and does not account for other means of assuming office. By this logic, if a president were to assume office through succession or appointment rather than election, it might not count toward the term limit. This interpretation suggests that if a 2-term president were to assume office through succession, such as being appointed vice president and then ascending to the presidency due to the incumbent's inability to serve, it might not violate the explicit terms of the 22nd Amendment. However, this perspective is highly contentious and would likely face significant legal challenges. The amendment's intent was to prevent any individual from holding the presidency for more than 2 terms, regardless of the method of assumption. Therefore, attempting to circumvent this limitation through reinterpretation would be met with intense scrutiny and opposition. Thank you for tuning in to Catch Calls. We hope you found our exploration of the potential avenues for a third presidential term insightful. If you enjoyed this discussion, please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analyses on pressing political topics. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below with your perspectives on this issue. Your engagement helps us bring you more content that matters. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you in the next episode of Cash Calls.